Our goal today is to give all of you a sense of what's brewing in Pennsylvania.
Today we are delighted to officially introduce Senate Bill 400. Our legislation will allow registered independent voters who have checked no affiliation or none on their voter registration form to vote in a primary election.
This wouldn't have happened 20 years ago, but you see what's happening. More and more people are identifying themselves as unaffiliated independent voters, and this momentum is gaining to allow them to vote in a primary.
But I served 20 years in the Senate, and what I experienced and what I watched over those 20 years was the fact that both political parties were struggling with the same problem. The forces from the left, far left, the forces from the far right had really taken over the primary process. And what we're ending up with is an extremist getting elected in general election.
It's just really exciting to hear how legislators are talking about these bills, not just us advocates in the world.
There is a clear indication that a lot of young people support this issue. Our generation has grown up in a time of very fragmented national discourse, very polarizing time. And so that has led a lot of folks in my generation feel unaffiliated with either party.
The two-party system has gotten to such extremes that we're still playing our role as veterans in fighting that extremism that's happening here on our own land.
We've introduced bills like the ones we have in front of us now, I think in each of the last four legislative sessions. And the way I look at it, the tide comes in a little bit further every time. But I am convinced that this is the year when the tide's going to come all the way in up the beach.
It's great to be with all of you today. This is going to be a rather different type of virtual discussion. I'm thrilled to introduce my co-host, David Thornburgh, who can be seen there in front of the Volkswagen, which has been touring all over Pennsylvania. Our goal today is to give all of you a sense of what's brewing in Pennsylvania. The past, the present, the future, the opportunity to pass open primaries legislation. We're going to meet some of the players and actors. We're going to see some videos. Our goal is to get the excitement going, raise some dollars to invest directly in the Pennsylvania campaign. So we're going to ask all of you, if you're excited by this effort, to lend your support. David, let me start with say hello, and then I have a quick question for you.
Sure, John. It's great to be with you. And yep, the trusty Volkswagen is my backdrop, but also resides in my driveway. So, have aging Volkswagen camper will travel, but it's great to be here.
Great. So you've been a strong voice for primary reform in Pennsylvania for many years now. And just in talking to you, and we were in Pittsburgh together the other day, I've never seen you so excited about the actual possibility of passing a bill. It's always in the past been moving the ball from, you love football analogies, moving it from the 15 to the 20-yard line. What's gotten you excited about this legislative session?
Yeah, you've heard me use this analogy, but it's a useful one. We've introduced bills like the ones we have in front of us now, I think in each of the last four legislative sessions. And the way I look at it, the tide comes in a little bit further every time. But I am convinced that this is the year when the tide's going to come all the way in up the beach. And I think there's a confluence of political factors, which we can talk about later. I think the growing awareness of the voice of independent voters is also critical. And just the continued, frustration, despair, disgust that people seem to have from both sides of the political spectrum with the way things are working now. So, put all those together as sort of tumblers in the lock, and it feels to me like this just might be the year.
Great. You've also recruited, and I can't say enough how jealous I am. You've recruited one of the best state campaign spokespeople in the country, none other than Mr. Rocky Bleier, the famous Steelers running back. He couldn't be with us today, but we have a great video which we want to show in just a second. But how did you connect with Rocky? How did he get connected to the ballot campaign, to the Ballot PA campaign?
Well, begins with, I'm a lifelong Steelers fan. You might be able to see through the blur. Oh no, it's the Volkswagen. I have, my office is decked out with Steeler memorabilia. But you know, your research pointed out how important veterans are to as the voice of independent voters. And so I was brainstorming with one of our campaign team, John Denny, who's also from Pittsburgh, and we thought, well, there's nobody better than Rocky Bleier, Vietnam vet and a football legend. So it was, we had this idea. John called him up, and literally in the space of a weekend, we had him signed up, we had him scripted, and we did a shoot on Monday to produce what I think is a really powerful statement.
Well, why don't we take a look at that? Russell, why don't we show this this message of support from Rocky Bleier?
Hi, I'm Rocky Bleier. If you are old enough, you may remember me for the years I played with the Pittsburgh Steelers. You may know I'm also a veteran. I served in the United States Army during the Vietnam War, where I was seriously wounded, earning the Bronze Star and a Purple Heart. The Steelers provided me the opportunity to battle back from my wounds and rejoin the team, ultimately to be an integral part of their 4 Super Bowl wins. My military service also provided me the opportunity to find a platform for the rights and freedoms of the American people, the ability to speak out on both state and national issues that become important to the American people. When I served our country in Vietnam, many of the men I served with couldn't vote or legally buy beer. They hadn't yet turned 21, but they could sacrifice their lives for this country. To a lot of us, it didn't seem fair that young men drafted to fight a war for their country couldn't pick the leaders who were sending them to risk their lives in battle. The rest of the nation shared that sentiment and came to believe that if you're old enough to fight, you're old enough to vote. And in 1971, the 26th Amendment to the Constitution was ratified to lower the voting age to 18. It was ratified in 4 months, the fastest amendment in U.S. history. That's why I'm concerned by the fact that Pennsylvania denies independent voters the right to vote in primary elections. It's an archaic law. You see, half of all veterans identify as political independents. That veterans choose to register as independents doesn't surprise me. When you fight for our country and our freedom, you're not fighting for Republicans or Democrats. You're not on the red team or the blue team. You're on the red, white, and blue team. That's why it's particularly disappointing to know that independent voters are barred from primary elections in Pennsylvania. How would you explain to a young man or woman returning to their family in Pennsylvania from their service in Iraq or Afghanistan that they can't cast a vote in a primary election? That's un-American. Now it's time we do something similar in Pennsylvania. It's time to repeal closed primaries and allow all veterans and all voters who chose to register as independents to cast a vote in primary elections. Every voter should be able to vote in every election. When more voters can vote, it's good for our democracy. And it's the only fair way to treat those of us who served our country to defend that democracy. Since I retired from football, I've lived and worked and raised my family here in Pittsburgh, and I am proud to call myself a Pennsylvanian. I care a lot about the future of our Commonwealth. Pennsylvania has been very good to me, and as a veteran and a Pennsylvanian, I'm here to voice my full support for Senate Bill 690 in the Pennsylvania General Assembly. Join me. Visit ballotpa.org to sign the petition to let your state legislators know it's time to repeal closed primaries. Thank you.
Boy, that's a great message.
Yeah, I have to say, as a lifelong Steelers fan, it is a huge thrill to have Rocky Bleier's cell phone in my cell phone. I feel like we have a special connection now. But he's a powerful spokesperson, and we were thrilled that he's been so engaged.
That's great. Want to bring in three leaders of the Ballot PA campaign: Marilyn Kelly Kavoda, Harry Ho, and Jennifer Bullock. Jen, I like to consider the kind of the original parent of the open primaries issue in Pennsylvania. And I actually want to start with a question for you. Actually, before we get into questions, Marilyn, Harry, Jennifer, just briefly introduce yourself, say hello, so people can meet you. And you got to take yourself off mute.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jennifer Bullock, proud parent, and great to be here. I'm the coordinator of Independent Pennsylvanians, so this is a real thrill.
Hello, my name is Marilyn Kelly Cavada. I am a U.S. Army retired combat veteran. So I am a co-chair for the Ballot PA Vets part of Ballot PA.
Hi, folks. I'm Harry Ho. I'm a sophomore, rising junior next year at Swarthmore College. I'm one of the 9 co-chairs. I'm from Montgomery County, but we've got folks from all over the Pennsylvania Commonwealth in our group, and I'm helping with that organization, help further elevate the presence of college students and this issue in our state discourse.
Welcome. Thank you all for making some time. Jen, back in 2007, you started leading protests in front of the polls with these great signs that said, I can't vote today, ask me why. And you were simply highlighting the fact that independent voters in Pennsylvania were not allowed to participate in the presidential primaries, which were hugely, 2007-8 was a big year in presidential politics. How have you seen the evolution of independent voters in Pennsylvania and nationally? What does that feel like to you? Or just say a little bit about that.
Well, historically, you couldn't always say that it's a fun time to be an independent, given that we're dealing with not having voting rights, but also being either ignored or derided or called curse words like swing voters, or the real fun one, you don't really exist at all.
Right.
But these days, with legitimized research and movements and real sense of empowerment and power, it's a much better time to be an independent. It's actually an exciting time to be an independent. And so I'm not surprised by the latest national polls saying, okay, 48, 49, 50% of people identify outside of the box of the two quote unquote major parties, quote unquote, because they're not a plurality anymore. And so quite frankly, 15 years ago, we would be talking to other voters in Pennsylvania who identify as independent. And there was a real, yeah, what can I do? Or yeah, it's not, it's just whatever. Like lack of sense of any kind of power, this kind of, whatever this is.
Right.
And now we can go out and talk to independents and, this has got to change. I mean, we have monthly meetings, discussion groups, and the passion that people bring into those meetings is just really exciting to see.
Wow, that's a big change.
Yeah.
That's really great to hear.
I agree.
Marilyn, talk about your organizing among veterans. What's that look like? What's the response you're getting? What's the message you're taking out to veterans, to other Pennsylvanians about the importance of open primaries for the military community?
there's a lot of support in the veteran community. As Rocky said in his video, about 50%, 49% of veterans identify as independents. So, here in PA, I select a party so that I don't give up my right to vote that I protected. I don't give up my tax money so that I can't vote. So a lot of support among the veteran community, but it's more eye-opening to just others who don't, when they think about the word veteran, and then they think about not having that right to vote, even though it is something that we fought for. It's been going a long way. We met with just a couple weeks ago out at the state capitol with some legislators, and as an Iraq war veteran, I was brought up to fight terrorism and extremists, and in doing that, I kind of feel like I'm still doing that a little bit. The two-party system has gotten to such extremes that I feel as though, as well as others, that we're still playing our role as veterans in fighting that extremism that's happening here on our own land.
Hey, John, let me jump in. Marilyn's being too modest. She was accompanying me to some legislative visits in Harrisburg, and you can't see her on the screen, but let's just say she's on the shorter side. But boy, she cast a long shadow when she walked into those legislative offices, because, as she said, to have someone, she was a medic, right, Marilyn, for 13 years, so saw a lot of stuff, and to have somebody like her look in the eyes of a legislator and say just that. My job as a soldier was to fight extremism. I'm very concerned about that same, that same capacity here in this country, and that's why I'm here. So hers is a powerful voice, and she's really stepped up among our veteran leadership.
That's great.
Thank you for the kind words, David. Yes, I am, as we all would say, vertically challenged. I'm only about 5 feet, but for those of you who are veterans among us, that C4 has a big blast, even though you just need a little bit. So,
got it. All right, you're our C4. How about that,
Roger?
Harry, we're going to come back to you. We're going to interrupt this discussion for a quick minute to talk with Joe Scarnatti, former Senate President pro tem and our current lobbyist. We're going to show a quick video from a recent press conference in Harrisburg by our legislative leaders, and then we're going to talk for a few minutes with Joe about the legislative campaign. So Russ, cue the video, and then we're going to talk to Joe Scarnatti and come back to you, Harry, in a minute.
Hi, I'm Rocky.
Sorry. Wrong video. Oh, here, hold on. I gotta get rid of Rocky. Sorry.
Don't get rid of Rocky.
There we go.
Over the last several months, Senator Bosco and I have worked together on this important piece of legislation to repeal closed primaries. Our legislation will allow registered independent voters who have checked no affiliation or none on their voter registration form to vote in a primary election. And today we are delighted to officially introduce Senate Bill 400.
2 decades, I have been sponsoring bills to allow unaffiliated voters to vote in a primary. I believed this 20 years ago, and I didn't have as many co-sponsors. I didn't have my great colleague over here, a Republican, I'm a Democrat, being prime sponsors together. This wouldn't have happened 20 years ago. But you see what's happening. More and more people are identifying themselves as unaffiliated, independent voters, and this momentum is gaining to allow them to vote in a primary.
It's not just that this is an issue that's wildly popular with voters. It's not just that this is that Pennsylvania is only one of 9 states that locks out independent voters, 1.1 million independent voters. It speaks to something more fundamental. And I'm going to quote former Republican Party Chair Alan Novak, who said, "This is the right thing to do, and it's the smart thing to do."
There you have it, John Opdycke. Well, if I can, I'd like to pick up the conversation with Senator Scarnatti. Senator, welcome. Welcome to Zoom land.
Thank you, David.
Great. Here he is in the Capitol, our man on the spot. Let me just pick up on, I just quoted Alan Novak, someone you know well from your political experience, who said, politically, this is the smart thing to do these days. That's apart from the fairness aspect, but you've been a champion of this issue. You helped pass it in the Senate when you were President Pro Tem, 42-8. What makes you think that this is, in fact, the smart thing to do right now politically, that there's sort of the political forces aligned to give us a shot to get this done?
Well, clearly, David, I served 20 years in the Senate. And what I experienced and what I watched over those 20 years was the fact that both political parties were struggling with the same problem. The forces from the left, far left, the forces from the far right had really taken over the primary process. And what we're ending up with is an extremist getting elected in general election, because both parties are going to the extreme right and the extreme left of their parties. And it's more and more evident now than, as Senator Boscola said, maybe 20 years ago. It's clearly easy to see. And you know, I would say all the time in my some floor remarks or speaking from the rostrum that what do taxpayers and voters really want? They want results. And we have seen no results in whether it's Washington or Pennsylvania for 4 to 8 years. No results because both are dug in. And if we want to get back to that pendulum of the clock swinging in the middle and not just to the far right or far left, it's better for the whole country and certainly better for Pennsylvania.
Yeah. You know better than I do, there's a saying about how stuff gets done in Harrisburg, and it involves the numbers 102, 26, and 1. That refers to you need a majority in the House, majority in the Senate, and the governor's signature. How do you handicap those three pieces as it relates to this issue right now? And I know you've been advising us capably the last few months, but what is our path forward to get to those magic numbers?
I like the odds of this year much more than I've ever liked them before. And one of the reasons for that, David, is the fact that there are issues that, let's go back and say it again, the far left, and there's issues the far right want to get into an election code bill and get to the governor's desk. There's fixes that need to be done. There's fixes that some just want to have done. And some of them probably shouldn't get to the goal line. But what I believe the chances are is that there will be an election code bill. There will be one that will be maybe generated in the House, generated in the Senate, and amendments will be added to it, and it'll be an agreed to product. And when I say agreed to product, all parties get a little bit what they want. The governor's happy and he signs the bill. And I believe that the odds of that are very great because we have as we know, we have another presidential race next year. And whether or not, you know, you're happy with Act 77 from, you know, a few years ago, or you want to see changes, there needs to be a bill moving. And I believe that this Ballot PA independence voting in primary is one of those items that will easily be able to go into that bill because it's passed the Senate once. It didn't make it through the House because of some issues over there with the leaders at the time. But I believe those that are there now recognize that this is more vanilla than anything else that they're looking to do.
Yeah. One other question, again, you know, from the playbook of how you get stuff done inside the Capitol, you need strong champions. And, you know, we just saw both Dan Laughlin and Lisa Boscola, folks you worked with over the years. And in the House, we've got a Democratic co-sponsor from Philadelphia, Jared Solomon, and a relatively new Republican legislator from Western Pennsylvania, Representative Marla Brown. Just speak to the issue of how important champions are, and your sense of the lineup that's leading the way that we have working with us.
Well, and that's a great question. We have a great lineup, and those that are in the House champion it. The Democrat representative and the Republican representative, very different people, very different districts, but the same problem, and they recognize the problem. And that in itself is a major plus for this issue. And Senator Boscola's been here in the Senate for many, many years, and she's been an outspoken advocate for this issue. Senator Dan Laughlin actually comes from a swing district. And there are still swing districts. And as I like to tell people all the time, it is not a general election you need to worry about. It's the primary. And so I think that our senators and our House members understand that this isn't going to fix every issue that we have with extremism, but it's a damn good first step.
Yeah, terrific. I would like to quote you. You said to me once about Senator Laughlin, you said he can get an awful lot of miles out of a gallon of gas, which I think speaks to his persistence and his focus. So I concur that we've got a good man in the driver's seat there, and certainly with your help.
Well, I thank you for giving me the opportunity, and this is something that I'm not paid to do. I have a real passion to do, and so I want to see this one get to the goal line.
Terrific.
One final question before you go, Senator. And we had a little discussion about this in Pittsburgh a couple days ago. What do you think the ordinary citizens of Pennsylvania can do right now that would be most helpful to put friendly pressure on their legislators to vote yes on this bill when it comes up for a vote in committee or on the floor?
Well, nothing as a former legislator, there's nothing that influenced me more than when I was home in my district office, that I got a phone call or I got a personal visit by whether it's a veteran or just a Republican, a Democrat, it didn't matter. Walk in my door and say, I'd really like you to tell me that you can support this. And if you can't support it, tell me why. And, it's pretty tough face to face, eyeball to eyeball, to be disingenuous on an issue and ask to talk to the member. I mean, you don't have to talk to somebody that works in the office. I mean, they will meet with you and schedule it and go in and see them. And as I always say, be polite, be prepared that maybe they're going to tell you they won't support it. And the best way to leave that meeting is, well, I certainly would hope that you reconsider, and I'll stay in touch.
That's great. That's very helpful. Thank you for taking time. I know you have a hard stop, and just appreciate you popping in for
heading to a Senate office right now. So thank you for having me. Take care.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you.
Oh, that's great. It's great to have such a veteran of Harrisburg politics being our chief lobbyist in there, because he knows where all the bodies are buried, right, David?
Well, I wasn't going to use that metaphor, John, but I get the point.
All right, we're going to open it up for questions in about 3 or 4 minutes. Before we do that, just wanted to ask you, Harry, about what the campus organizing looks like. What are young people saying? And let me just, do young people talk about this issue? I know that the statistics show they're very independent, but is this something you're finding that students and younger voters are concerned about, the closed primary system?
It's a great question, John. And I think the answer in short is yes. Young people have a vested interest in this issue. And a lot of folks say young people are the generation that are going to fix some things that maybe need fixing, and whether that's politics or the direction that the country's moving in. And that all begins with the way that elections happen. And while this might not be something that is on the conversation all the time with young people, there is a clear indication that a lot of young people support this issue. And part of the reason why that is because we have grown up in a generation, or our generation has grown up in a time of very fragmented national discourse, very polarizing time. And so that has led a lot of folks in my generation feel unaffiliated with either party. And even if we register for a particular party, it's the identification that we don't really feel strongly about. And so what we found just in the past few months as we've kind of grown our group is that this might not be an issue from the outset that people were thinking about. But once you start the conversation going, hey, what do you think about the direction the country's moving in? Hey, how do you think the state of our democracy is right now? What sorts of issues mean the most to you, and how do you think the ways that elections are held might affect some of those issues? All of those questions directly funnel themselves into this issue. And we ultimately have found that a lot of folks have supported this and are supporting this. And for that reason, we've had folks all across Pennsylvania supporting us. We have folks at Haverford, folks at Swarthmore, Cairn University, McGill, UPitt, and that's just saying the folks who are leading our group. But we've also just started a newsletter last week and grown it to 50 people. And so this is an issue that we're continuing to address and do outreach, because we do think, as I said before, young people have vested interest in open primaries.
That's great. That's really great to hear. Jen, I know, Marilyn, you have to go, but Harry, hope you and Jen can stick around to answer questions. Thank you, Marilyn, for taking some time out of your day.
John, I was able to swing some things
Oh,
and
great.
I can stay on till 2.
Awesome. So we have you for questions. All right, we're going to open it up. We're also going to raise some money. David has been a really successful fundraiser over the last several years. He's brought in some large gifts to help the public education side. And now as we get closer to actually passing a bill, knock on wood, we need to raise hard dollars, C4 dollars, to really invest in the lobbying, both in the halls of Harrisburg and at the grassroots. So we want to ask everyone today to contribute, whether it's $10 or $10,000. All you have to do to donate is just type your name and the amount in the text, and then we'll follow up with you. You don't have to do any websites today or addresses or anything like that. Just put your name and address, put your name and the amount in the text, and we will follow up with you. To ask a question of David or I, Marilyn, Harry, or Jen, just type your name, your state, and your question, and then we'll call on you to take yourself off mute, and you can ask your question directly. Go ahead, David.
Just to make it clear, the questions that have contributions affiliated with them
will get
do
asked.
not go to the top. This is no pay to play or pay to say. But John, let me just say a thing about the fundraising. I know there's a lot of you. I've been on these calls. There's great folks doing work all over the country, and you know that raising money is probably everyone's least favorite task. But we've been at it. We've been fortunate, as John said. We've raised over $1 million in philanthropic money, in C3 money, which we can use to educate and build awareness. But these are the toughest dollars to raise. The dollars to frankly, put Joe Scarnatti and his team on this, and to do other things that you can do as a C4. I said to John, these are what I call this is the get her done money. This is the get her done money. This are the dollars that we need to apply directly to this process, convincing incumbent legislators to support a bill that they might be a little cautious about. So anything you can do is really much appreciated, and very grateful for all of your support.
That's well said, David. Want to go to our first question is from David. Am I pronouncing this right? Guyon or Gion?
Gion.
Gion. I'm sorry, David. A question about the policy. So go ahead, ask your question.
No, it's pretty straightforward. I'm just trying to understand if this bill is successful in Pennsylvania, if I live in Iowa, but if I lived in Pennsylvania, does that give me the right to either go participate in the Republican primary or Democratic primary, or are you guys going for one single primary?
Yeah. David, thanks for your question. Let me cut to the chase. This is what I call sort of a baby step approach to reform. And this is simply to allow independent voters like Maryland and actually Harry and me and Jen to choose a primary in which you vote every primary season. So it's not a free for all. It's not Democrats voting for Republicans. And there's a time and a place in other states which are more amenable to that. But our calculation is that's not Pennsylvania right now. So we're trying to gain the ground that we can gain and hopefully set up more ambitious plans in the future. But so that's where we are. Thanks, David.
Thank you.
Just a word about that. I agree with you, David. It's a baby step, but I think it can also be a very impactful baby step, because one of the things that we've seen in Colorado, for example, is that simply giving independents the right to vote does two things. One, you start to see how many people are in the state who are actually independent, because the polling shows that 35, 40, 45% of Pennsylvanians consider themselves independents, but only 11% are registered independents because you pay a penalty if you register as an independent. So I think you'll start seeing more and more people register independent. And given how influential Pennsylvania is as a swing state, as a presidential state, the fact that independents now have the right to participate is going to generate national news and really help amplify this conversation around the country for this form of open primaries as well as other forms of open primaries. That's how
John, just to jump in, you're absolutely right. But we have to be careful in that this not be perceived as anti-party.
Right.
I think the best way to approach this is to say this can be a net positive for the parties, because it allows you, it gives you sort of a try before you buy moment with voters. Rather than conscript you in the party in order to let you vote, we let you vote. And then, you know, if I'm a party official, I can sell you on our values, our candidates, our issues, our platforms, whatever, even get you to work, you know, on behalf of our candidates. So it will come down to how the parties react to the change. They can embrace this or they can run away from it. But I just want to make that point.
That's a great point. All right, we have a question from Rob Barb about the kind of the approach that's being pursued in Pennsylvania. Go ahead, Rob. And where are you from, Rob? Do we lose Rob?
No, I didn't.
Oh, there you are.
Okay. I didn't realize you were going to ask me to speak. Yeah, good morning, everybody. Thanks for letting me speak. My question was, I mean, because of my background, I don't have exact details of how some of the political wheels get moved, but you guys have those bills already in progress. But as we all hear in the news, it seems like it takes a lawsuit to get things moving these days. Is that a tool that your organization can use?
Well, it's a great question. And I'll just say we have done a fair amount of legal research and kind of have that research in our hip pocket if we think it proves useful. And, you know, there's two schools of thought. One is we could be kicking the hornet's nest with a lawsuit, or we could be providing an excuse to get something done that otherwise would be more difficult. But we've, as I said, we've done the background research, and we're with the help of our advisors just looking for the opportunity if it presents itself, and then we can go into action. Let me slip in a little something, John. I know you're all probably enamored of the Volkswagen in the background, so I'm just going to say, if you'd like one of your own Volkswagen stickers, we'll send one to anyone who sends in a contribution of any amount. And you can do as John Opdycke did. John, hold it up. There you go. See? We want to see those all over the Commonwealth, if not over the country. Little Volkswagen, all of your own. So end of commercial, back to our regularly scheduled program.
Sounds good. And we have a little commercial coming up. We have a question from Dr. Jesse Fields about the difficulties of this effort. Go ahead, Dr. Fields.
Hi, hello, everyone. It's great to be with you. This is so exciting. My question was really having to do with the last go round. It did pass in the Senate, but it didn't pass in the Assembly. Like 2 years ago, it passed in the Senate. Right. So I think Senator Scarnati somewhat answered this question. It sounds like there are champions in the Assembly, who important champions, who are supporting the bill. So I think it seems like it has a lot more that kind of, insider political support, which is great. So this is very exciting. Thank you.
Yeah, we're in the new session of a legislature, so much more so than in the past, it's really a brand new legislature. The Democrats have taken the House for the first time in, I think, 12 years. There's something like 50 new members, which is partly a function of new redistricting maps. So as Senator Scarnati points out, there are a lot of folks who are now incumbents, new incumbents, who are might be concerned about anti-incumbent challengers taking them on, and perhaps those challengers would derive their energy from more extreme segments of the voters. So if we can package this to them as something that helps them do what they were elected to do, we may have a winning argument. So I thought that was good advice.
Great. I look forward to being with you at some point and celebrating.
We'll bring you home to Philadelphia.
Yes, and also helping would love to join you. Thank you.
Wonderful.
Well, and I just want to add quickly, you've been with us, Dr. Fields, all along, and
there she is in the background,
on the streets with us, and it's been an honor whenever you've been able to come down and support us. To add on to the question, John, that you asked, the champions of the House and Senate bills are not just champions on paper only. I've got to say, when I hear Representative Jared Solomon talk about opening the primaries, he beats me out in passion. And I've been screaming on the rooftop for 15 years now. He is like an inspiration, talking about how committed he is to making this happen. And so the champions, there's a quality, and Senator Laughlin as well. It's just really exciting to hear how legislators are talking about these bills, not just us advocates in the world.
Yeah. There's another, I want to give a shout out to another rep from Philadelphia, Chris Rabb, who's been in the legislature for about 3 terms, African-American from the northwest part of Philadelphia. And we're really grateful to have his voice as well.
We had a question from Richard Carroll about the unions in Pennsylvania. Go ahead, Richard.
Yes, thanks for hosting this event. This is fantastic. I'm in Oregon, where I'm working with a group called All Oregon Votes to also open our primaries. So it's always pleasant to hear about efforts that look like they have a really good shot at success, and trying to learn about your lessons learned. Previous attempts in Oregon have been blocked largely by the dominant party in the state and union and trial lawyer coalitions. I'm curious if you've run across similar coalitions that are fighting this, and how you're dealing with that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Let me speak to the issue of the unions first, which actually is shaping up to be a potentially very important source of support for this effort. I was out a few weeks ago speaking to the building trades in Western Pennsylvania, who are very frustrated, honestly, with their concern about that there aren't people getting elected to office that they can work with, who are more pragmatic, more get her done types. They're not terribly patient with ideologues. So this proposal appeals to them because it feels like it moves in that direction. And I've heard similar things from labor leaders in Philadelphia as well. It's very consistent with what we hear from business groups too, which is, business folks generally want stability, predictability. They're not, interested in politics that veer wildly from one side to the other. And they want people that they can work with. So we've done probably a half dozen breakfasts and lunches around the Commonwealth with business groups and also hear strong support from them as well. So somewhat to my surprise, the labor folks seem to be warming to this.
I want to go to Kip Froelich in Tallahassee, Florida, who wants to write a big check and wants to know where the money's going.
Yeah, I was waiting to see that. The question is, it's kind of a couple questions out there. They relate. Where are you in the Pennsylvania legislative session? When is it scheduled to end? How long does it go? I'm in Florida. We thankfully ended ours a few days ago, thank God. But when does yours end? And then, and realistically, this part of the campaign, what does, where does $100 check go to, David?
Sure. Good questions. We're at the beginning of a 2-year legislative session. Oh. So we've just started. And if you've not that you would have followed it, but it took a little while for the House to get organized. There's only a one seat margin in the House. And there were some special elections and all kind of intrigue and so forth. So things are really just starting to roll. Our best sense of timing is, and Senator Scarnatti mentioned this, we've got this presidential election coming up. Both parties have an interest in addressing a set of questions about who votes and how they vote and so forth and how they count votes. And that's either going to get resolved, say, before July, because it can use the budget process as leverage, or it'll happen in the fall because that's the last moment when you could get it done to take effect. To your other question, the money we're raising right now is I said get her done money. It's to fund our lobbying effort and to fund our direct voter outreach effort, which is we're this a campaign originated in the organization I used to run, the Committee of 70, which is a long respected 501c3. But you have to be very careful as to the lobbying limits within a 501c3. So with John Opdycke's help, actually, we've created a 501c4 fund that allows us to do this more political work. So that's what we're raising money. And we've raised about, our goal was about 250. That's 1,000. And I looked today, we're at about 130,000 we've raised. Just by contrast, this blows my mind. The Senate race that we held in Pennsylvania last year, $375 million was raised and spent on that. So this is bargain basement. No, I'm being facetious, but hope that answers your question.
Thank you.
Now, David, a question: if someone gave 1,000 or more, would you be willing to pick them up in the Volkswagen?
I am so glad you asked that, John. If you are within a 2-hour drive of Philadelphia, give or take, I'll extend it even, and you contribute $1,000, I will pick you up in the Volkswagen and take you to lunch. All right, limited time offer. We have about 10 minutes for that offer to take effect. So you just think about that. You can even choose the restaurant. All right, the Volkswagen. And there will be ample photo ops too, because you want keepsakes from this special occasion. I promise. There you have it.
Great. All right. We have a great question from Rhode Island. I'm really glad. It's Elena Goldstein from Rhode Island about the impact of open primaries on candidates in both parties. Go ahead, Elena.
I'm actually from Philadelphia also. I'm living here in Rhode Island.
I'll be by and pick you up in a little bit.
I'm more than 2 hours away, hon.
Oh.
Any way you count it. But I would like one of those bumper stickers, and I am going to contribute. Not $1,000 bucks, but I am going to contribute.
All right.
We have something like open primaries here. I'm registered as an unaffiliated, and then when the primary comes, I have to choose which one I want to vote in, and then I have to unaffiliate again. So it's kind of like open primaries. But as long as I've been here 20 years, and I do not see any change in. As a matter of fact, I ran once as an independent, and it was they voted for they vote Democrat here in Rhode Island. So we have a different problem where it's pretty much a one-party state, somewhat like Philly is. So how do you get more candidates running? Because I think that's what I want. I want a better choice of candidates,
Yeah.
So,
well, I'll just begin by quoting Senator Scarnatti. This is not going to solve all problems for all time, but it pushes things in the right direction. It's the right thing to do for those 1.1 million independent voters. And it could, change has an interesting kind of a snowball dynamic to it. Once you crack the code and say we can do this thing, then all of a sudden people think you can do that thing and another thing. And so, this could be the beginning of a series of, a kind of a virtuous cycle where we think hard about the process that we have in place. Much like, by the way, if you're a student of history, happened 100 years ago, when, by the way, we created direct primaries. That there's something that leaches into the atmosphere that says we got to do what we can to fix, improve, modernize our democracy. And I think this is just one of what could be a number of things.
Elena, also, I don't want to put Gary Sass on the spot, but I'm going to put him on the spot. Gary, we're lucky to have him on the discussion today, is one of the leaders, along with Guy Defoe, of an effort in Rhode Island to take the next step in that evolution. Gary, would you mind just saying a few words about what you're doing in Rhode Island?
No, I'm happy to. I think, like most states, the two issues with the current primary system, one is really voter suppression, because if you don't have any choices, if you let people vote, you don't give people a choice, then you're suppressing the vote. That's a real issue. The practical issues beyond the ideological one are competition and participation. Competition here is almost non-existent in a strong one-party state. And in terms of participation, primaries are our most important election, but only about 20% of the people who vote in a general election actually vote in a primary. And the choices are pretty limited when they get to the general election. So we have a group that's pretty broad-based. It's called People's Primary. And we had made a decision whether we should work on the outside or work on the inside. And there's a lot happening in the Rhode Island legislature in response to our initiative. We've testified before a Senate commission, and we've had some very good conversations, with the leadership in the legislature. And it's a new concept to them. We believe that the state ought to seriously consider something like California's top two, or some form of ranked choice voting, or something in between that's custom made for the conditions in our state. And so this is the first year that we've been working on it. And I don't know how to measure progress because I'm not sure anything will happen this session. But in terms of working with the legislative leadership, it's pretty much meeting all our expectations. It's probably something that's not going to be done in 3 months, but the seal is broken and just got to keep on working it.
Thanks, Gary.
Hey, John, let me just slip in. Russell just tells me that we've received over $2,500 in pledges, which is huge.
That's great.
I'm so grateful, but I do have a few more stickers left and we have a couple of minutes left, so don't miss your chance.
Yeah, you still have time to put your pledge in. I want to go to Kathy Stewart in New York, which New York, as everyone knows, is like Pennsylvania in that it completely bars independents from participating. Go ahead, Kathy.
Thanks, John. Hi, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yep. Yep.
Okay, great. I am so excited as someone who has watched all the work over these many years. Special shout out to Jen for building the momentum on the ground year after year for so long. Here's my question. If you guys pull this off this session, which, wow, it seems like you might, how do you think this might reverberate nationally, and especially in those states like New York and New Jersey that are completely closed and don't have INR? So our only pathway is like the one that you guys have crafted. And I just love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah. Well, we don't have INR either, and John and I have had many conversations about that and that challenge. But I think this will be huge. I could riff on the fact that this is where independence was born and raised, but I could also, Pennsylvania has been known forever as the Keystone State, which no one really quite knows what a keystone is, but it's the thing that holds up an arch. And given Pennsylvania's significance in the presidential sweepstakes, I think this really could all come together with a powerful message and powerful momentum for the role of independent voters. And by the way, I point out to folks, you can go look this up. It was independent voters in Pennsylvania that swung the 2016 and 2020 presidential election. Because unfortunately, 95% of Republicans now vote for Republicans and 95% of Democrats vote for Democrats. They cancel each other out. So the game is for, the competition is for independent voters. And that's not lost on candidates and parties. But I think if we can secure this win, it underlines that point and makes it very clear how significant independent voters are to the nation.
Yeah, just to add to that, Kathy, I think that it's still the case that working in legislatures is very difficult. They're conservative bodies, not ideologically conservative, just introducing a new issue.
They're risk averse.
Yeah, they're risk averse. And politicians in some ways, they're loath to change the rules that they already know. They know how to get elected in the current system. That said, the amount of political volatility, of political pressure, that is emerging from all kinds of places, from the grassroots, from political philanthropists, from the media, there are new opportunities out there. And we saw this in Maine. We passed an open primaries bill in Maine with 75% bipartisan support. It took 5 years to do, but we did it. And it's now opening up conversations all over the country, including in Rhode Island and in Pennsylvania and in other states out west. So I'm a big believer in that you just don't know. You don't know where your breaks are going to come. You don't know when they're going to come. And that's why it's important to be working in these arenas, even when it seems like there's no clear pathway forward, because you never know what's going to open up.
The line I use, John, with our team, as I said, you train for a marathon and prepare for a sprint. And you never really know when the sprint's going to come.
Right.
But you got to be ready, because if you haven't trained, you're not going to win the sprint.
Very well said. And I think, again, thank you all for joining us. This discussion will be made available on our YouTube. We're also going to be sending a follow-up email to all of you that has the Rocky Bleier video. Encourage you to share that with all your friends, whether they live in Pennsylvania or not, but particularly if they live in Pennsylvania. You've got 30 more seconds to put your pledge in the chat. If you haven't been inspired to give, please do so. And we'll be keeping you in touch. This is going to be a very important campaign over the next many months, and with national implications, and really want to be able to rely on all of you to help in whatever way that you can.
Hey, I just want to say thank you, John, and Marilyn, and Harry, and Jen. And I really can't tell you how much we appreciate your financial support, because these are tough dollars to raise and really makes a difference. So thank you all.
Yeah, and Jen, Marilyn, Harry, any final words you want to leave people with?
Yeah. So in the conversation, we were discussing, how nationally, just, my parting thought is this is a veteran issue in Pennsylvania, with veterans not getting that right to vote, but it's also impacts our currently serving military who have to every 2 or 3 years relocate from one state to another. And those who are getting out of the military, returning to Pennsylvania when they may have been stationed in another state, not realizing that we have closed primaries and they will not have that right to vote during a primary. So it's not just affecting our veterans, but it is also impacting our currently serving members of the military.
That's a great point. Jen, Harry, any final words?
Thank you so much. Let's keep going.
Bet.
Yeah, I'll just echo that I think we have a really strong team just from the past several months that I've been working on this issue with David, Jen, with Maryland, seeing the leadership of John, and we're grateful for everyone who has been supporting us. And we're all about transparency with the students group. So if you're interested in seeing the agenda, the action items, we're also low budget. We've only spent, I think, $100-something this whole time, and we've got 50 people already signed up on our newsletter in the past 2 weeks. So we're high impact, low budget. And so if you want information more about what we do, I can also drop my email in the chat, and feel free to follow up.
We'll include that in the follow-up email as well, Harry, so people can connect with you directly.
Sure thing.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day. Thanks for your support and participation, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you all.